let's talk about a little bit something similar to this the question that you had sent me, which I thought was very interesting. Is now let's assume I know we're talking about psych issues a lot, but let's go a little bit broader. You mentioned that I as an employer I'm told that now I have to do an accommodation, because this person has a workplace restriction due to workers' comp, and I don't want to do it. And well, how do you like you said you get that question quite a bit? How do you handle that, or what do you do?
I do, and that was something that I kind of wanted your insight on as well, because I'll have it where my client's been treating, they've been off, perhaps they've been off from work, and now the doctor says, okay, you've reached that plateau, I'm going to release you from treatment, you can go back to work, but you have restrictions, okay? And let's say, the employee goes and presents the restrictions to their employer, and the employee knows that they have positions available that would allow for this accommodation, that wouldn't be a promotion, maybe it's actually a demotion, but they have the ability to accommodate them and the employer chooses not to. That's usually when I make referral to employment law attorney.
Yeah, because yeah, definitely. As soon as you mentioned the question to me, I thought ADA, and I'm like reasonable accommodation. So it comes back to I always think the fact that a lot of these things come up because we get to talk to people, and when we fail to really consider another person's position, a lot of employers sometimes become very business focused. Oh, this is going to be a hassle for me. I'm going to have to hire someone. I'm going to have to, I don't know if I can afford them to go part time because I need it for X, Y, and Z. It becomes about themselves, and they forget that the person obviously is injured, and if they had their way, they would not be asking for accommodation. If there's no interactive discussion, I always wonder about that because I'm like Carlos mentioned before, documentation. Any judge or any law, a jury's gonna want to know, well, how did you address this? Like, what did you do? Did you just ignore it? Did you actually try to accommodate them? Was it just too difficult? And so, yeah, I definitely has hints of ADA if an employer doesn't want to accommodate a workplace injured employee. So,
So potentially it could be a claim.
oh yeah, I think so for sure. Because if I'm basically injured and it's a temporary, even if it's a temporary disability, it's a disability, and under the ADA, I'm supposed to at least interactive accommodation. Now that means there's an interactive accommodation standard, but that doesn't mean it's automatic. I mean, it could be undue burden. What if I'm only a one or two employee firm, right? So there's an undue burden standard. So there are
So
exceptions.
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
That's perfect segue, Sanjay. So what does accommodation mean? When someone's, for a doctor says they need to have certain accommodations, what is the employer's responsibility then?
Well, like I think Jennifer mentioned, like, if I have similar positions, that could be, if I have a similar position that I can offer them, then yes, you should offer them, period.
What if they
Now,
don't have a similar position?
if they don't, then they have to consider, giving them the hours they're looking for. Now, listen, ultimately, it's always a fine balance, right? Like I mentioned, the one or two person employee places, which is, a lot of small businesses, it ends up being an undue burden. And then they may have to just put them on leave. They may not be able to accommodate. But I believe workers' comp, I think, is a little bit unique where I think they do try to find ways to make sure the employee goes back to work unless they are permanently disabled. Then I believe then it gets into another thing of where I think Jennifer you mentioned once, even if they're considered to be permanently disabled, they could still work. So employer may have to just still accommodate their restrictions, and if they can't, that they may have to then
So
tell.
let's say I'm an employer and I make the decision that I cannot accommodate that particular situation.
I better have some great documentation explaining why I can't. It can't be just, oh, this is a pain in the butt. I don't want to do it. Or, this is
It's
too
a hassle for me. I
difficult.
don't want to.
It's too difficult. It's like kind of what we talked about before, like, won't do it. It's not a question of, I don't want to do it. That sounds like too much work. It's going to make me do X, Y, and Z. Those are not good enough reasons to not do something that, I keep saying the word, I don't mean to say the right thing, but it really comes down to, you get to listen to the other person and try to find a way that works for both parties. That's just the way it is. And ideally, it should be. Hopefully, it is temporary, so they don't have to keep doing that.